Hey everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. This is episode 17, and in this episode, there isn't much, as much anyway, of a focus on like one single project. It's more sort of tying up some loose ends and sort of filling out more of the city. Um, right now, I'm starting off by sort of going to this pedestrian street right next to the stadium and detailing it with a few shops and restaurants, just to add a little bit of life to this area. Again, I don't focus too much on detailing like this in most of the city, but for sort of important areas like this, I add a little bit more, to bring some character to the parts of the city like this. You can see here I'm adding this pub, kind of this corner, and I think the asset I believe is from Ireland, and the year on there is like 1300 or something. Um, I'm not sure within the story of the city that this it makes sense for it to be that old necessarily, but I can imagine this has sort of been a staple of the community for a long time, and it's probably whereas some of like the diehard supporters of Nyrstad Viking FC, the team that plays in the stadium across the street, that's probably where they gather, before and after matches. So that's kind of a cool little detail. Now I'm moving sort of across the main road, and starting in doing some infill, adding some sort of generic office buildings to that little sort of oddly shaped triangle lot of land. And now I'm using intersection marking tool to add some trees lining this kind of main boulevard. This is a little bit of a dividing line in terms of sort of separating a couple different neighborhoods. It's a little bit of a wider road, so I added some trees just to kind of mix things up a little bit. Now you can see I'm playing around with these sort of generic, sort of modernist housing tenement buildings. And as you probably, as I think this is what I make the title, but this is sort of I'm sort of playing around with these buildings because I'm trying to make sort of a social housing area. And you can see I sort of moved some of those buildings off to the side. And what I realized is I needed to have some sort of physical barrier between kind of the old like historic city and sort of like these more like sort of modernist buildings they're probably built, I'm guessing, like in the 60s or 70s, something like that. So they're not like brand new or anything, but they're a lot newer than the rest of the city. And the way I decided to sort of create that divide was I ran this kind of metro corridor through here, and I tried to sort of have it kind of like pop out like you can see that sort of triangle lot of land, that sort of street kind of like continues onto this now above ground metro section. And that's kind of that's an effective way just of making it look like there's kind of been like these sort of corridors have sort of been developed over the years, especially when you're looking at it from like a sort of bird's eye view. It's cool to see those kind of like those sort of main themes sort of running through the whole city. And that's kind of sort of the idea that I was going for with this rail line. It doesn't really connect to anything yet, but in the future, when I do some more work filling out the metro network, there'll be trains running up and down here, and that'll be cool to see. Now you can see I moved these sort of housing blocks back into this area. I spent a little bit of time trying to like sort of rearrange them and kind of figure out what the best layout was. I sort of didn't. You can see I sort of gave up for a second, and I sort of moved back some of the older sort of European style old buildings. And I used this pack from Berlin. I've used these buildings before, but I sort of put a bunch of them all together like this to sort of create this like one massive building. And I'm sort of imagining that this is like maybe it was like an old government building or something like that. Maybe it's now like a museum or possibly maybe it's like a private school or something like that. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments what this type of building could be. My sort of next big project that I kind of want to work on, it's sort of important for the story of the city, is building like a sort of government complex made with some more modern buildings, kind of to this area to the left of these housing projects. And I sort of have the roads kind of set up over there with the idea of having kind of like a sort of modern plaza area where the sort of national government is headquartered for the country. I'm thinking kind of to build off that, I think this will sort of sort of the hulking old building is probably, maybe it's like an old government building that's been repurposed into something else. Now I'm kind of doing some detailing on this metro corridor, adding some ploppable pavement to kind of get these sharp edges. It ends up looking pretty nice, I think. Again, I'm not sure how realistic it is necessarily, but yeah, it sort of serves to add this really effective contrast between different areas of the city. And you'll especially see that towards the end of the episode when I've sort of filled out a lot of these blocks. Yeah, you can sort of see the kind of satellite view. I think it looks pretty cool. I'm also making sure to use a couple different types of buildings. I didn't want this sort of housing project area to be super boring, even though it's pretty repetitive. Yeah, I wanted to add a couple different styles of buildings just to mix things up. And you see, I had a little bit of trouble deciding what to do with this road. I had originally just had like a plain road with a bike lane, but I realized this area is going to have a ton of people living in it, so I wanted to have the tram run through here as well. There'll also be metro service at some point, but I wanted there to be a lot of transit options in this area because there's a lot of people who live here, and there's a lot of people that will end up working in this area with the sort of government complex nearby. So I figured it was important to have a lot of transit access in this particular spot. Yeah, so I had to sort of shift some of the buildings around to sort of get that tram line in there, and to still have a pretty wide road with the protected bike lane in there as well. Sort of fiddling with these nodes to try to get all the sort of transitions to be as smooth as possible. And yeah, this kind of, again, this is another sort of, this wide road is kind of a border between different areas. So I spent a little bit of time on it a little bit later in the episode, kind of detailing it and making it look a little bit nicer. Now you can see I'm sort of fiddling again with this sunken rail corridor, kind of moving these barriers around. And you'll see I deleted those pavement surfaces. I'll redo them in a second. And yeah, now I'm using, I've talked about these blank roads before, and how you can just use an intersection marking tool to kind of make them whatever you want. And it's super, I'm not sure what the word for it is, but it's really easy to just sort of copy and paste the markings. And yeah, create these super custom roads pretty easily. Yeah, so that's a huge asset in this type of build that I'm going for, getting very specific type of road that maybe doesn't exist in the real life or on the workshop or whatever. You can just create it by yourself, which is pretty cool. As I'm recording this episode, the trailer for City Skylines 2 was just released. And I guess I should probably, maybe I'll just talk about that a little bit. The actual trailer didn't have much in terms of actual information. It had some cool graphics that were specified as not actually being from the new game. But yeah, in terms of like what I'm looking forward to, I'm hoping that, well, I'm hoping for one, that the sort of base game of City Skylines 2 is basically like a sort of fully fleshed out in the sense that it has all this kind of DLC content that we've had to purchase over the years for City Skylines 1, and hopefully that's all like included in this new version. But then yeah, hopefully they sort of, I'm not knowledgeable enough with the sort of how it actually works, but hopefully they sort of streamlined the kind of foundation of the game so it can run a little bit smoother and have more, and sort of the vanilla game hopefully will be more performance. I mean, for like what you get in this sense, I'm not describing that well, but I'm hoping the sort of graphics and the functionality of the vanilla game are improved. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what it looks like. It's coming out later this year. Yeah, let me know what you guys are hoping is included in the game, what you're worried about, whatever. Yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Getting back to what I'm doing on screen, you can see I'm sort of just copying and pasting the same building here to kind of create interesting pattern. I sort of based this on a couple different real life examples from sort of different European places, and yeah, they kind of it's not that complicated to build something like this, in the sense that the buildings are all pretty generic. And yeah, just you kind of use the same one over and over again, which is nice. and it's easy to fill out kind of a large area with sort of minimal detail. And yeah, I mean, I think the most important part for an area like this is that it looks good, sort of like from above. It kind of just like fills out a big area. It looks convincing, um, and yeah, I think that this area does that for the city. Um, which yeah, well, that's what I was mainly going for. So I'm happy that it turned out that way. You can see I'm sort of extending out the sunken rail corridor. It's getting it's like sort of inclined so that it like eventually it'll be elevated on the very edge of the island over there. So I'm kind of just gradually shifting it upwards. And now I do like a little bit of detailing in this area, not a ton, again, because I don't want to. I mean, I can't afford to detail every single area super in depth. And yeah, now this is the area that kind of fill out with more of the kind of old style buildings that I've done previously. And once everything's sort of in, the rail corridor will really serve to highlight the sort of divide between the old and the new in the city. And yeah, I mean, I've talked a ton about the process of building out blocks like this, but yeah, I don't really do it here. I sort of do that later on in the episode. But yeah, so now I sort of move back over to the housing project area, and I sort of do a little bit of detailing, adding some fences around these soccer fields. Again, you don't want a ball flying into the metro tracks. That would be bad for a lot of people, I can imagine. So yeah, I think these fields and the basketball courts to the side there are like a really important addition to an area like this. And yeah, I mean, when I was building this area, my sort of main goal was for this to be like, it's not that it's like a super nice area necessarily. Like, it's not like super fancy or anything, but it's like a nice place to live, like there's like, like kids can play on these fields, and like it's not, it's just kind of a place, and it's not like they're sort of, yeah, I feel like where I'm from in America, housing projects like this are sort of, they have really negative connotation. They're associated with a lot of crime. And yeah, I didn't want that to be the case for this place here that I'm building. Again, it's clean, it's close to the city, it's close to a lot of transit. So yeah, I think I do a decent job of capturing that. Let me know sort of what your thoughts are on that. Yeah. Anyway, I am roughing up the sort of pavement a little bit. Again, this isn't like, it's not a brand new area or anything, so makes sense that there'd be a little bit of wear to the concrete. Yeah, I'm also adding a couple of trees and planters and stuff like that. One, to sort of just fill the space from a visual perspective, but also, just in-game to make things look a little bit prettier. And yeah, I think adding these sort of rows of kind of like pretty simple, but like, effective trees like this. It's a good example of like, this is clearly like a government run, or like government built, I should say, place. And I think that kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier. I'm now doing some more like marking of these intersections. This one right here was really complicated with the intersection of the bike lanes going in two directions. I don't show all of it in the footage here just because it's super tedious and I've done it before. Yeah, the final result of sort of small projects like this is usually super rewarding. And yeah, when it really ties things together when you sort of fill up these nodes with all the sort of small details that the intersection marking tool allows you to. I'm not sure necessarily how realistic it is the way I sort of like set up the bike lanes. I don't actually know if it works in game or not, but I think it looks pretty cool. Again, that's kind of the default. That's kind of what I'm going for. Yeah, if it looks cool, I usually leave it in. As I sort of finish up this intersection, I move back over to the other side of the kind of main road, and kind of do a little bit of detailing on this plaza area. Again, kind of adding some texture to the ground, and I add the detailing for a tram stop here. I have to kind of shift the nodes around to get the stop to appear where I want it to, and yeah, it kind of almost threatened to mess up some of the work I'd already done. But I was able to just copy and paste, again, with intersection marking tool, the kind of template that I have for a tram station, or like a major tram station in the city, and then I copy and pasted some of the props, and yeah, just in a couple of minutes I have a fully customized tram station, which is really cool. I then add a couple of bike racks here. Again, this is like, there's a ton of people living in this area, so it makes sense you would have a lot of infrastructure like that. Then I kind of just threw down some tables with umbrellas. They're kind of taking up a lot of space here. I am kind of sort of pushing all of these a little bit closer to that big, what I'm calling an old government building. And yeah, again, these are just kind of to fill space more than anything, in all honesty. But I think they look pretty good. Yeah, adds a little bit of color to kind of this big concrete area. And yeah, same thing. I'm copying and pasting some of these trees. Sort of do the same thing for this sort of main road through the social housing area. Yeah, I mean, this, like, I sort of talked about, like, not wanting to do a ton of detailing, but it is important in terms of, like, being able to narrow down what's important to include. And yeah, so sort of like basic thing, like, basically what I want to do is to, like, make sure the work I'm doing is as effective as it can be, in the sense of, like, I'm detailing the highly important areas. I'm adding trees where they're highly visible, in both in-game and, like, in the sense of it being a functional city. Like, that's what matters. You want to sort of allocate your time and resources to kind of, yeah, again, the most important areas of the city, and that's what I try to do. That's what I try to do in this episode in particular, but also just in the series more generally. That's kind of my philosophy for going about building places like this. In that vein, I'm adding another one of these sort of highly important road junctions here, changing up the markings, adding a lot of detail to these, like, specific areas. And yeah, I changed the kind of main road template a little bit too, because I thought it would be kind of confusing to have that dotted line in the middle. Yeah, another little thing that you kind of just have to change as you go along. That's what I found. Things aren't made perfect the first time, so it's important to kind of just always be adjusting, always be sort of like recalibrating sort of how you're building a city. That's kind of that'd be kind of my advice. That's sort of what I've learned playing this game for a while now. Yeah, that's kind of my sort of basic philosophy. I'm sort of cleaning up the edge of this road here, and then I'm moving back over to the kind of old side of the tracks, if you will, kind of readjusting some of these roads. I spend a lot of time. I don't spend a lot of the actual episode placing down a lot of these buildings, just because, again, it's pretty repetitive. But yeah, what I'm sort of thinking for this area is the part that's kind of closer to what I've already built. That's kind of more just a continuation of the old city. It's got a lot of the same buildings, sort of the same scale. And then the part that's like on this road, butting right up to the rail corridor, that part's gonna be a little bit more modern, a little bit newer. I think there's probably like a road that went where these tracks are now. I kind of mentioned that when I was first laying out the road network in the beginning of the episode. I kind of mentioned having that kind of one straight line that was formed by the sort of diagonal road and the train tracks. And in terms of the actual, like, story, yeah, I'm sort of imagining that the train tracks would probably replace the road at some point. So the buildings here, the ones that are like right up against the tracks, are probably a little bit more modern, and they probably date to like more when the metro system was like being expanded and built out. So yeah, that's kind of the logic behind the sort of decisions I made in this area. Yeah, this is sort of part of the process of just filling out this area with kind of classic, like, European style buildings. I've started like basically the first part of the series was like the oldest part of the city. In that area, I really I wanted there to be as many like crazy looking blocks and like weird shapes as possible. That's really not sustainable, like, for my own workflow, kind of long term. So areas like this, I mean, they're not all like right angles or anything like that, but there's a lot more repetition of the buildings, and I think that kind of makes sense. Again, this area is a lot more. It's like newer than the older parts of the city, so it makes sense there'd be kind of more of these like uninterrupted blocks of buildings. At least that's my sort of thought process behind this area. I think it makes more sense, and it makes things a little bit easier. It's a little bit easier to fill out large blocks at once. And yeah, that's kind of the way I thought about it. You can see we're sort of moving back towards the stadium. I talked about how I added that pub, sort of the first thing I did in the episode. I had kind of another one on this side of the main sort of boulevard area. I guess it'd be kind of cool to have like maybe names for these pubs. But that'd be a nice detail to add. So yeah, if you have any ideas, preferably something that relates to the team or relates to the city and the history in some way. Yeah, that'd be a cool little detail to add. I would like to take a moment at this point in the video to thank you guys for watching. If you made it this far, I hope you're enjoying the video. I'd appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, it means a lot to me. And yeah, again, thanks so much for watching. I'll talk a little bit about the kind of end of the sort of building process here. This is that second pub that I was talking about. Similar process to the last one, sort of adding a little bit of extra detail to this little area just because, again, it's a little bit more visible. And I wanted to show that maybe this is sort of a more historic building. It's maybe been built around as the years have gone on, so I'm adding a little bit more of these kind of cobblestones and maybe some, like, you can see I've sort of added the old cobblestones. Again, kind of just to mix things up a little bit, which I think does an effective job of sort of conveying some history in this area and making things a little bit more interesting overall. I sort of moved back to doing the more generic building here, kind of splicing buildings together, etc. Yeah, the last thing I ended up doing is, you can see kind of here, this is like some of these more modern buildings with the balconies out in front. I imagine these were built probably later on, historically, just again, because of the reasons I laid out earlier, where the tracks were probably built, and then, some buildings were probably knocked down, and then some more modern ones took their place, kind of just in the history of the city. This like cool triangle building, it was like newly added to the workshop recently. And I knew I had to find a place for it as soon as it came out. I believe it's from Toronto, here in North America, but I think it fits in pretty effectively here. I'm going back to this like kind of wonky intersection that I built in the last episode. This thing is like a real mess. I kind of like it that way. It's clearly like been kind of grandfathered in. It doesn't really make any sense, and it's probably not the most efficient, but I think it looks pretty interesting, which is kind of the most important thing for it to do. It's got the tram going through, it's got the bike lane, it's got the car traffic, it's got all kinds of stuff going on. It looks kind of weird. It definitely doesn't work as well as it probably could, but I'm kind of happy with that. We're coming up to the end of the episode here, so thanks again for watching. Give the video a like, subscribe, check me out on Instagram and Discord and all that stuff. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Bye.